talk to me.
You asked me a question and I answered your question. Tell your story, dude.
Oh! What's your... Yeah, you just... You didn't even do an impression of you, dumbass! William! Nothing to do!
When you rely too much on the group for your source of strength, you better be judicious, because if you use the group's strength for bad purposes, your opposition, out of spite, will find a way to alienate you, and then they will rip you apart. Once they do that, the group's approval vanishes, leaving you open to being publicly dismantled and stripped of your status, and there you will stand, alone, facing the consequences of the actions you took when you thought you were invincible. Chad Daniels, the comedian's first big break on industry-leading comedy podcast Kill Tony, cannot afford to be embarrassed publicly and never invited back. William Montgomery, a regular on Kill Tony, cannot afford to be humiliated by someone who is not well known or deserving of such power. One of these two famous people are going to have their social acceptance and their career progression negatively affected as a result of this conflict. Podcast host Tony Hinchcliffe, co-host Redban, and guest Sam Morrill are not aware of the war that they are about to bear witness to. The terror, which would not end for another 3 hours of this podcast, if it ever did end, began, so far as I can tell, with comedian William Montgomery stepping foot onto the stage and meeting eyes for the first time with comedian Chad Daniels.
William Montgomery. That is very correct. I am the popsicle prince, and I do control the weather. To me, the biggest mystery about the Trump assassination attempt is how in the hell did Hillary Clinton's fat ass climb up on the roof of that building? Guess y'all heard the news. Dr. Ruth died. Rest in peace to the woman who taught me how to orgasm. I'm developing a new subdivision aimed at attracting middle-class working Italian families. I'm gonna call it Pizzagate. Okay, that's my time.
At William's first scream, we notice Chad get startled, stop scratching his nose, come to attention, and give William a slight smile. There's two things we need to discuss here: Chad's smile and the corresponding effects that being startled in this way on a public stage have. You see, over the course of William's set, Chad smiles only when William looks at him. Smiling only when physically prompted by our counterparty can serve as an appeasement gesture and an attempt to diffuse social conflict in the face of a perceived threat. By having it be an outward expression instead of just an inward realization, these artificial smiles show us the true extent to which he was startled. To have your social expectations violated to the point of being visibly startled during your introduction sets the stage for the building of bad will between both parties, the seedling from which all our conflict will stem from. As we will see, this impropriety causes one party to become less concerned about making a connection and more concerned about their own self-preservation.
And we took her to the vet, and the doctor says it's not a parasite, so now we're taking her to some real expensive place in Sedona, Arizona. This found a worm in Gator's vet. And now this doctor here in Austin's telling us that's not the case.
We see that Chad has now used his arm to put up a physical barrier towards William. The use of these gestures can not only act as a protective mechanism that provides psychological distance to facilitate clearer thinking, but the subconscious need for such an outward mechanism implies the strength of the discomfort and the problem at hand. This is further confirmation to us that Chad is now more concerned with self-preservation self-preservation than being in the moment, as a result of feeling like he was perhaps intentionally startled, and it is here that we begin to see William looking over and slightly noticing Chad's adverse reaction. At this point, Chad is trying to cautiously figure William out, and we are let in on the true depth of his confusion and intimidation in this next clip.
And now this doctor here in Austin's telling us that's not the case. And I found online there's a great guy in Sedona, Arizona.
What's the guy in Sedona gonna do?
He specializes, Tony, and if you're...
There's a character that we haven't introduced yet. An invisible character that goes by the name of the Group. The Group is an abstraction. It cannot be touched, but it can be visualized. And as we will see, it can exist in a room acknowledged by all the other people as if it is really right there. Responsibility for the statements that are coming from individuals on behalf of a group, in this case the panel, is often ascribed to the entire group. People within that group are often seen as tacit acceptors unless they provide some type of signal to show that they don't agree or support it, whether it be verbal or nonverbal. So in an attempt to subconsciously disassociate himself from being responsible for whatever Tony says, Chad looks down and away from William the second that Tony starts speaking. Chad is concerned about the nonverbal commitments that he is making in this moment. He wants to prolong his judgment and avoid putting himself in a position that might experience the hot end of William's irrational wrath. Now, his avoidance of this implies that he is at least subconsciously aware of the existence of this dynamic, and it is precisely the future abuse of this dynamic that will be the catastrophic source of the approaching downward spiral. But for right now, as more time passes, Chad gets more and more comfortable looking William head on when the group speaks, and William notices.
Searching. I was so scared. I had Tony is the scaredest I've been in forever.
The vet said it doesn't have a parasite. Everything is okay. The dog will be fine. And you went online, found a guy in Sedona that searches through dog.
I found a worm and gator shit, Tony.
That's Red Band keeps repeating that's very normal.
It's very normal.
As the interaction continues, Chad slowly comes to increase the level of eye contact he offers William as Tony is speaking. Perhaps just to get a better look at William and gain more information in his prolonged judgment of him. But the more Chad looks at William while Tony is speaking, the more he non-verbally cosigns whatever is coming out of the group. However, William can begin to feel the heat of Chad's gaze on him, and he doesn't like it at all.
He eats food off the street. I don't know if people know that. That's probably
That's my thing.
When William and Chad meet eyes, William makes an auditory sound of disgust that throws him completely off track and puts up a physical boundary of crossed arms as he likely realizes, great, this guy doesn't get it. I'm going to have to deal with him. You see, up until this point, William could notice out of his peripherals the tentative responses that Chad was giving him. William's last joke before his sound of disgust caused Chad, now with his arms crossed, to furrow his eyebrows. This was the tipping point for William. No matter what Chad was thinking internally, the signals were too strong and went on for too long for them not to be perceived as a negative judgment by William. Within an interaction, the longer that a physical barrier, such as crossed arms, is present, and ambiguous expressions are used, such as furrowed eyebrows, the more likely the other party will be in beginning to assume that it is the result of a negative judgment towards them rather than a personal issue. On top of this, it is important to note that this expression came as an outward noise instead of just an inward realization. The outward expression of disgust came belting out of him almost as if he didn't have a choice. And it is this that cues us in to the seriousness of the conflict. The loudness of a response is directly correlated with the amount of pain, discomfort, and emotion that is causing the response. And we know that this disgust from William is targeted right at Chad as William replicates his physical posture immediately after, a passive acceptance of the fight that is so quickly approaching. The auditory sound of disgust triggers Tony into a belly laughter, likely because he knows Chad is looking at William with a sense of confusion and judgment. It is what Tony says after that makes us realize that, on behalf of the group, Tony takes the lead for Chad for the first time in this Chad vs. William conflict.
He eats he eats food off the street. I don't know if people know that. That's probably
It's my thing.
stressed.
Chad, have you seen William before?
I haven't.
How are you, Chad?
I'm great.
It is here that we find confirmation of the acceptance of the battle within William's tone. To have your first statement towards someone be condescending shows that you've already made your mind up about them perceiving you negatively. A condescending tone, especially during the introduction, can signal a predetermined negative disposition towards the listener, inspired by a perceived negative evaluation from the listener. William's tone in his introduction, as if he's talking to a child, implicitly communicates the message that if you look down on me, I'll look down on you. It is in this way that William makes his first implicit attack, and Chad responds in a similar, uniquely way.
Chad, have you seen William before?
I haven't.
How are you, Chad?
I'm great.
Cool.
An unwillingness to engage in the intentional stupidity of our counterparty implies, from our counterparty's perspective, that we either look down on such things or we are too nervous to readily engage in it. Taking all of the previously sustained negative signals towards him, William assumes that Chad's ultra-normal responses as coming from a place of hubris, and that it is also coming from a place of negative judgment and a desire not to engage on the same freakish level. William is determined to confront Chad's negative perception of him, and it is here where we also get an insight into Chad's adrenaline response.
What do you do? Are you a comedian or what do you do?
Oh my God, William!
No.
Why do you do that to the guest?
I've never
That's
met
what I
you.
forgot
We've
to
never
tell you guys
fucking met.
earlier.
It's okay.
I mean, remember when I said
okay.
I
We've
feel like
never
I'm forgetting
met.
something? What I forgot to tell you guys was sometimes William takes shot at the guests to not worry
That
about
wasn't.
it.
The group comes to Chad's aid, and immediately Chad calls off the cavalry. He knows, at least subconsciously, that he doesn't want to be a part of the group, and that it is much more honorable to take the battle one-on-one. However, we don't see him say or do anything after he calls off the cavalry other than uphold his nervous physical barriers, which brings us to a moment of silence. Chad had a chance to take the offensive here on his own, but he didn't. It's likely because in that moment, he is realizing that he's being attacked, and in this realization, his fight, flight, freeze response is shutting down his systems and causing him to freeze. This is not good for Chad at all, because it is in the realization that one is freezing that brings about the heightened awareness and realization of one's actual weakness and true lack of strength. Becoming increasingly more aware of his weakness as William gains more and more courage to strike, Chad needs to figure something out fast.
To tell you guys was sometimes William takes shot at the guests to not worry
That
about it.
wasn't. That really, I swear it
He has a
wasn't.
bad reputation
It's okay.
for it. He's like, what? William, what are you doing?
Chad is still stuck in this adrenaline response as he slowly puts his hand on his chest to give a somewhat theatrical yet sentimental "it's okay." And this stops William instantly in his tracks, like a shark who immediately locks on and changes course the second he smells blood, like a lion staring down his own destruction. Chad's internal realization of weakness has now externalized, and William notices it as he locks on his gaze. Chad has let out blood, and William hasn't eaten in weeks.
Wasn't. That really, I swear it
He has a
wasn't.
bad reputation
It's okay.
for it. He's like, what? William, what are you doing? Are you starting? Get over there.
No, I'm not.
Oh, what?
Like a wounded seal, Chad is praying that the subject changes before he gets pounced on. His strength to fight this battle one-on-one is non-existent as he clutches the mic in fear. Before choosing to engage in battle, William offered Chad multiple attempts and plenty of dead silent space to give his input and partake in his silliness, but all William feels he received is negative judgment. Tying things together, for William to previously ask, "Are you a comedian?" allows him to defend himself from the negative view that the audience will come to have as a result of this awkward moment. And it simultaneously sends the implicit message of, if you were funny, you would have engaged in my stupidity with me. I will not let your negative judgment of me slide. William, feeling justified in his rage, is about to smite down Chad, but Chad, in his weakness, acting quickly, does this.
What?
Oh, what? Why are you looking Chad up and down?
Yeah,
like
he's
that?
sizing me up all
He
of a
is.
sudden.
He's
I
sizing
think I
you
could
up.
kick the out.
Whoa, William.
Beat your
Do not try.
Yeah, no, when I ask again. So what are you, a comic or something?
Whoa, William.
I can take your ass.
Chad realizes that he can't do this alone. He needs help from the cavalry, making an implicit appeal to Tony as to why William is pressing him instead of just handling it himself. In this way, Chad shrinks back into the group, and from here begins to sacrifice the potential strength of his individuality for the more secure, less honorable strength of the group. Through this assimilation, William now becomes the underdog. William is no longer looking at his prey of Chad. No, now he's fighting against the group, where Chad will soon be hiding with him. The realization that he is the underdog now makes William feel justified in elevating the confrontation to the next level. With this realization, will William go all out against a bigger opponent, or will he regroup and look for an opportunity to alienate Chad?
Whoa,
I can
William.
take your ass.
Whoa, William, don't do that. William, don't do that.
Dog has worms, Tony.
After making an attack as the newfound underdog, there's a long, intentional silence. During this silence, both of them are leaning away from each other, as if there is a revulsion to the literal tension that is growing between them. Physically leaning away from an interaction can also help with judgment. It's a small way to remove yourself from the situation to think more clearly. The greater the lean, the greater the tension. However, this also implies that both of their emotional states are spiked, and high enough to the extent that they are both clouded enough to the point where they need to take an action like this in order to see the situation better. Psychological distance and tension affects cognition and decision making. Creating physical distance can lead to higher level abstract thinking, reducing the impact of immediate emotions on judgment. Spiked emotions lead to greater volatility and unreliability. Through the silence and the lean, William is able to make the judgment of Chad's surrender through assimilation into the group. So William backs off, for now, changing the subject. Like the video and subscribe for more stories in communication psychology. However, contrary to William's belief, Chad is not backing down. No, he's merely regrouping. And once William realizes this, his fury will be exponentially greater than it would have been before being misled.
Has worms, Tony, and the vet is telling me this is the first time in my life I've been gaslit, Tony. Isn't that what gaslighting is? When you know something's true, but people are telling you it's not true? It's been the worst week of my life.
But we start to see something very strange begin to happen. As William speaks, Chad begins to offer more and more eye contact. William can feel the heat and the pressure from Chad's gaze, and it surprises him as he turns, notices him, and then locks on again to him. William backed off before, but the strength in Chad's stare makes William realize that the war is still here. And it is at this moment that William locks onto Chad's eyes, as if in preparation to send a psychological predator missile his way. Now that Chad is showing passive strength on behalf of the group, William feels justified in calling off his mercy. As Tony begins to launch attacks on behalf of the group, Chad's eye contact takes on a much more sinister underlying intention.
And week of my life. That was kind of a dumb idea. Normally you are good at that. That was kind of a stupid deal on that one.
That was a good one. Why are you turning
was?
on everybody? Yeah.
Because I'm not happy right now.
Because of the worm in the poo?
Shoes. I haven't worn these shoes a lot.
Oh, those shoes are terrible.
I thought for a second you were about to say you liked them or something.
No.
Oh, gosh.
Oh, God.
You don't like them?
Why would you wear Why would you wear shoes that give you blisters? William, you're rich now.
Canadian tax up there, so no, I mean, it's not good. I ended up losing money this past weekend.
Well, you didn't lose money exactly, but Canada sucks.
Through this segment, Chad is holding his eye contact more and more and more. Chad's maintaining of his gaze as Tony berates William cues us into the reality of the strength that Chad feels when a part of this group, remembering that when he was on his own, he intentionally averted his gaze as Tony spoke. William first turns on the band, but gets shut down by Tony, and that is non-verbally co-signed by Chad. As the attention comes off of him for a moment halfway through, Chad puts down his physical barrier and now just self-soothes, perhaps in a hopeful attempt to not inspire any more attacks from William. However, as Tony talks to William, Chad still doesn't relieve his eye contact. And it is through this that we come to realize that Chad is using the strength of the group to non-verbally communicate his perception of William to him. Chad, feeling safer and safer behind the shield of the group, now casts his gaze of negative judgment on William. Every attack from Tony is ascribed to the group, and now that Chad is part of the group, William now becomes the underdog, further justified in his offensive. It is perilous to trust that which we have acquired very quickly. You see, Chad found new safety against William, but as William begins his conquest, Chad better be careful not to rely too much on this newfound strength.
Gambling.
Oh, man, I've been playing blackjack. They've been calling me blackjack at the blackjack table. And I was doing so good in Vancouver, and then I just started losing every... Have you ever played blackjack before?
Oh, you're talking to Chad, making amends. Here we go.
Yeah.
William's asking a neutral question, testing the waters and also checking Chad's allegiance to the group. Chad's response is slow, short, and not expressive of common ground. The lack of engagement from Chad implies that he's resting on the laurels of the group. From William's perspective, this cements Chad's negative judgment of him, and it also cements William's future justification for attacking Chad here on out. There is no attempt made here from Chad to hide or veil the passive aggression, and so the sends the implicit message to William of, you can't touch me. Individuals who hold power but feel personally inadequate are more likely to exhibit aggression when given power. There is a positive correlation between someone's power and how little concern they have with managing others' impressions of them. Chad feels comfortable sending this message because he is invincible here. He has the panel behind him. He feels that he is legion and that his newfound strength cannot be affected by this underdog. As things take a turn for the worst, pay close attention to how William reacts.
Yeah.
Got a tough guy. You're kind of tough on that one. That was kind of like a tough guy response.
Here we see, once more, the lean from William, letting us know that the tension between them has completely revived, and the emotions stemming from Chad's attack are clouding his judgment to the point where he has to lean away to see clearly. We must remember that it is at these points of judgment and emotional cloudiness that we are most volatile. We are at a fateful crossroads, where before William showed mercy after his lean, now he is beginning to feel more and more justified as he gets closer and closer to setting out for vengeance. But simultaneously, Chad begins to twist the knife.
You're gonna tough on now, and that's gonna like a tough guy response.
You asked me a question and I answered your question. Tell your story, dude.
What's your...
Baking soda! No.
We see the moment of great confrontation from Chad's side, a fearlessness in elevating the conflict, a symptom of perceived invincibility. Chad tries to deny the audience's reaction to his confrontation, as if this is only between him and William. However, the audience's reaction was only normal. Chad brought this on himself when he shrunk back into the group in order to protect himself. This is no longer a one-on-one war, and now you cannot sit here and deny its consequences. He fails to acknowledge, whether intentionally or unintentionally, the benefit that he has gained from shrinking back into the group and the corresponding negative effects that his persistent eye gaze would have. It is through this lack of acknowledgement that Chad feigns like he has been an individual representative this whole time. You see, he wants the confrontation, but he doesn't want to be blamed for it. And it is within this realization that we are cued into exactly why Chad shrunk back into the group in the first place, and why he now indulges in war once he reached a position of strength through the group. William, alone in this moment, stirs anxiously, looking desperately for a way in, as he realizes the colossus of Chad's strength that he has unfairly grown, knowing the whole audience is behind Chad in this moment.
Baking soda! No.
Yeah, do you see what you just did?
Did
see
I
what
say
you
what
just did?
did?
Yeah, do you see what you just did?
Say what I just did. I know what I just did. I put a worm in your dog shit, bro.
Chad realizes he has a foothold here as he doubles down. This decision to double down and trust in the future loyalty of the audience causes William to drop all facades. William's face has his smile get ripped off of it as Chad crosses the point of no return. William knows this is war, and all Chad does is revel in his unbeatable strength.
I put a worm in your dog shit, bro.
William remains silent, a patient shark who knows that the diver's cage can only last for so long. William's silence signifies the reality of the situation, and it serves as an implicit indication that an uncrossable, forbidden line has just been transgressed. Silence can be a strategic response to social violations. The longer the silence, the greater the disapproval. The longer the silence, the more seriously it indicates the relationship's rupture. William implements this silence at too unlucky of a time for Chad. As the more William prolongs this silence, the more Chad begins to second-guess his own strength. And this is especially unlucky for Chad as something simultaneously begins to change within the group. As the comedian next to Chad, Sam Morrill, gets up to go to the bathroom, all of a sudden Chad feels awfully alone. His hand goes up to his face in the creation of that physical barrier the second that Sam leaves. Chad is having the subconscious realization and doubt that he may no longer be connected to the group, and that the power of the group wasn't to the extent that he thought. Realizing that there is no one next to him, connecting him to the group, Chad's panic is exacerbated when he looks back to William. And William is still dead silent. The diver's cage has been opened, Now, as his eyes dart back and forth, clenching onto his face, Chad is alone, staring down the barrel at the punishment for the actions he committed when he thought he was invincible. A debt for which he never thought he would have to repay. The time for repentance has passed, and in a complete turn of events, Chad, in his panic, realizes that he is at the complete mercy of William's wrath.
I'm just gonna let this storm settle, see what happens here. I kind of like this. I'm gonna let this go like.
I mean, it's like I'm joking around and then you start making fun about how I talk. I mean, that seemed kind of. I was blatantly joking around and then you come at my making fun of how I talk. At least I have a distinctive way of talking. You sound like some just idiot when you talk.
Oh my God.
You sound like some boring old white dude when you talk.
Oh my God. Oh my.
I couldn't even do an impression of you, dumbass.
William. William, what did I tell you about turning on guests like that?
No, seriously, how would I do an impression? Talk, say something else. You don't sound any kind of way.
What is going on right now? This is absolutely incredible. This is
It's like you make fun of how I fucking talk. You say something about my fucking dog. You've never met Gator.
Oh my God, William, you are out of control right now. Look at how serious. Oh, he winked at him. There's the wink.
Yeah, whatever.
Before going on his attack, William subconsciously realizes that Chad's separation from the group means that William is no longer the underdog. And so to combat this, he takes the meta approach of breaking down the argument in an implicit case to secure the audience on his side before he goes in for the kill. William unloads onto Chad, making sure everyone in the vicinity knows that Chad crossed him. William revels in his laughter like a madman who is fighting for something that had a minuscule chance of success. Chad's physical boundaries coming back up the second he is alone cues us further into his realization that the strength of the group is gone. And now things get even worse. As William unloads onto Chad, Chad remains steadfast in maintaining that physical boundary. At the end, William makes an appeal to absurdity by winking. Likely because Chad didn't fight back, William takes this as a clear victory. It is not until Chad keeps fighting that William gives the finishing blow.
Chad, did you wink back at William?
I've not winked back at you.
If you want to,
I've not winked back at William. Ah, no wonder you don't talk up here.
William mocks Chad once more and Tony laughs, further alienating Chad and removing him from the strength of the group. Losing Tony, the head of the group, means that Chad is losing all of his reinforcements. The strength of the collective is no longer. Chad has nothing to stand on, nothing to fight with. William knows this, and in remembering how Chad didn't have mercy on him before, William begins to twist the knife.
Ah, no wonder you don't talk up here.
this is crazy. William, you're out of control tonight.
William deploys his laughter as an outward declaration of victory. Every time he laughs insanely, he stops immediately and looks over to Chad before breaking out in insane laughter again. Each one of these pauses is a twist of the knife from William. Each one of these pauses allows William to show everyone in the vicinity that Chad can do nothing about what is happening. He has been surrounded and neutralized. The more William laughs, the more his victory gets cemented, and the more William laughs, the more Chad's loss gets solidified. Now, Chad, sitting there with nothing else to shrink into, there's only one thing he can do to stop the torture.
William, I can't have... How am I supposed to book some of the best comedians in the world on this show when every time I have one on, you take shots like this and you...
He made fun of how I talked.
That's not how you were talking.
How was I talking?
You were taking it up. You were being dramatic.
How was
I
that it
matched you.
sound?
He's gonna make fun of you again if you keep asking him that.
I'm not going to make fun of
Okay.
you. Come on.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, you just missed everything.
I
Wait,
missed
hold on.
so
Who are you? Are you a comedian? Who's this guy?
Chad denies responsibility for the blame of starting it, which was foreseeable given the previous signals, but what he doesn't do is give any other information or attacks that would deny William the win here. This handshake from Chad serves as an attempted peace treaty, a desperate implicit plea to stop the violence. William shows his acceptance of the plea deal by turning a satirical rage towards Sam, the man who implicitly separated Chad from the group. In any war, the weaker party, recognizing its disadvantaged position, is more likely to make concessions or seek peace to prevent total defeat. It is in this request for peace from Chad where we are able to realize that he fully acknowledges internally that he has no other options. He knows it, William knows it, and everyone in the crowd knows it too. Be careful with your power, lest you be torn apart. But what happens when someone misused their power long ago, thinking they got away with it, and ends up being confronted in the worst way possible, on live television? Click the video on screen now to watch the breakdown of how actor Michael B. Jordan stops bullies from spinning false narratives. My name is Glidget Ronan. Thank you so much for watching.